guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad you stopped by today because today we are going to be making a mandrake. If you guys don't know what a mandrake is, a good example of this is from Harry Potter. There's a scene where they pull out a little plant from a pot and it's kind of humanoid and it starts screaming really loud. That's pretty much a mandrake. Now this piece was a commission and I was given instructions to just have fun with it and make it in my own style. So I'm not trying to emulate any specific type of mandrake. It was just something that I came up on the spot. Anyways, let's get started. Okay guys, the first thing that I'm going to work on is the clay face for our mandrake. After that, we'll start putting everything together, and honestly, putting everything together and painting it is going to be a little bit different compared to how I normally put my art dolls together. Also, I'm not used to making humanoid type faces, so this was definitely an interesting challenge for me. Anyways, for making the clay head, I'm also going to be making this a little bit differently as well. So normally I use a glass container and just build my face right off of that, but because I don't really need to make the head stick out of the body too much, it's going to be kind of a flat piece, I'm just going to work directly on the counter. So I just laid some tin foil down, that way I wouldn't get clay all stuck to the counter, and then I made a little bit of a lump of clay, that way I don't have to have the entire face really thick. So I'm going to take my clay, I'm going to start laying it out over our lump of tinfoil, and I'm going to start smoothing everything and just kind of slowly figuring out where I want the facial features. So for the face layout, I really wasn't sure how I wanted to go about it. I just kept messing around until I kind of got a rough idea of how I wanted it to look. I knew that I wanted the facial features to be kind of exaggerated in different spots, and I also didn't want to go with an angry face with this one. I wanted to go for something that was still asleep, something that wasn't currently screaming. So because of that, I'm going to have the eyes closed, so I won't have to worry about making open eyes right now. And then I also wanted to give it a very bulbous nose along with an exaggerated mouth. Now because he's sleeping doesn't mean that he's in a good mood, I still kind of wanted to give him a little bit of a frown. So I'm just slowly working my way down the face. I'll probably hop back up to the forehead and mess with the eyebrows a little bit more, but I really want to get the main eyes, nose, and mouth in place first. So I'm just taking strips of clay, laying them out where I want the mouth to go. I'm actually using my tools a lot for this one. Normally, I don't really start with my tools until after I get the basic shape down, and then I really go in with the details. But for this, I kind of wanted to detail everything as I went. And then after I had the eyes, nose, and mouth all done, I slowly started building up the face around it. So I gave him a chin, I started building up his cheekbones, and then I went around his eyebrows a little bit. Now I'm not giving him eyebrows, but I am giving him brow bones. And I just kept messing around with it, adding textures, different things like that. Eventually I cleaned up the edge around the head, that way there wasn't as much clay. And then once I was happy with how it looked, I decided to put it in the oven for about, I think I put it in for about 45 minutes at 275 Fahrenheit. Now normally I would say it's time to paint after it's out of the oven, but we're actually going to put our mandrake together and then paint everything at the very end. I figured it would be easier to blend the face into the body this way, and then we wouldn't have to color match. So now that the face is done, we're going to start working on the other pieces. So I'm going to start with the leaves and branches. So for the leaves, I decided to go with a pretty simple shape, and I ended up making them all out of felt. I decided to go with a dark green and kind of a lighter green, that way I had multiple colors to work with. So once I had all the leaves cut out, I decided to kind of randomly bunch them up. So I'm just kind of sewing a few of them together here and there until I have kind of separate bunches that we can add to the branches. Once I have my leaf bunches all put together, I'm then going to start taking some wires and I'm going to add them to the end of the wires. I figured wire would be the easiest thing to sculpt into branches and the sturdiest. Also, while I was doing this, I put a few of the wires together to make it look like they were branching off of each other. Now, I didn't do all of them this way, I just did about 3 of them. And then once I had those put together, I need to cover up our wire, that way they're easier to paint. And I actually found out that the best thing to cover up the wire with was my 3D fabric paint. It kind of has a more rubbery texture and it dries and connects to quite a bit of different things. So I decided to go over all the wires with this. I had to do a few different coats on some of them just because the wire was kind of showing its shape and I wanted to hide that under the paint. Now this paint does take a few hours to dry, so I'm going to set it off to the side and we're going to start sewing. Okay, so this is the pattern that I'm going to use to make the mandrake's body. I decided to make the body a little bit fatter this way because I'm not going to make sides, it's just going to have a front and a back, and I figured if I made it a little bit wider than I wanted it, it would wrap around better. So it does kind of look like a potato right now, but that's okay. So the first bit of sewing that I need to work on are going to be his arms and his legs, which are going to be roots. And then the little branches that are going to come out of the top of the head, part of them are going to be fabric. So I'm going to pin these all together and I'm going to start sewing them with my sewing machine. With the roots that are going to be for the arms and legs, I'm not closing off the very tip of it. I need that open for wires to come through. So I'm just sewing down the sides. Now before we start putting the body together, I need to add the face to one side of the body. So I ended up cutting a little hole where I wanted the face to go. I'm going to add a little bit of glue around the base of the head, and then I'm going to rest the fabric for the front of the body over the face. I'm going to make sure everything is laid out correctly, and I'm going to let this dry. And then once that's dried, I can start putting the body together. So I'm pretty much going to be putting the body together but inside out. So I'm going to sew everything in place where I want it. I'm not going to add the branches to the top of the head just yet. I need an opening, that way it's easier to flip right side out. So I'm going to get everything put together, flip it right side out, and then we need to add a wire frame to this. So I made a pretty simple wire frame. It kind of looks like a stick figure with a few extra branches at the very top, and I'm just going to open up the back of our mandrake and we're going to slide the wires into all of the different limbs. I'm going to get that in place, and then we need to stuff and close up our mandrake's body. Now at this point our mandrake is put together. We don't have the branches on yet, but we need to kind of shape his body because he's just really too smooth to be a root, and I want to make him all lumpy and stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut random pieces of fabric to kind of fit in different spots on his body, and I'm going to stuff them after sewing them in place on the body, creating kind of lumps where I want them to be. So I'm just messing around with the basic shape of his body, adding lumps here and there, stuffing them, messing around with it until I like the basic shape of him. And then once I think the body of our mandrake is lumpy enough, we're going to start adding the tree branches. So I'm going to take those little leaf branches that we made earlier, and I'm going to start connecting them to the wire frame that we have in the fabric branches. So the main branches that I have, I'm going to connect directly to the wire frame, make sure to cover up the seams and everything with the fabric, and then a few of the extra ones I'm just going to cut holes for and glue into place. For this, I'm just trying to figure out what way looks the best and just kind of adding branches as I go. So it took me a little bit before I liked how this looked. And then for his arms and legs, we need to add a lot more roots to them and just kind of make them look a little bit more stringy. So what I did was I made a bunch of different shapes out of felt, out of more brown felt, and I just started gluing them in place on his legs and arms. After that, I decided to take my fabric paint again and start adding more texture to his body. So I'm just going to go over where I have all the tree branches, where I have all the roots, just adding more texture throughout him so he doesn't just look plush. I want him to be kind of wrinklier and just like more plant looking. So I went all out with my 3D fabric paint, I let that dry, and now we can finally start finishing him up. So for the final paint, we're going to be using a mix of acrylics and my fabric markers. Mainly because the fabric markers work better on the fabric, but the acrylic is definitely needed for his clay face. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start with an acrylic to try and get his face a very similar color to his body. So I'm going to paint that and kind of blend it into the fabric. And then I want his roots and his branches to be a lot darker, so I'm going to start going over those as well with a really dark brown. I'm going to fade the brown into his main body, and then I'm going to start using my fabric markers. I'm going to add kind of more of a red tint to him, but this is going to get blended into a bunch of other colors. So it's kind of like an undertone. So I'm just slowly adding colors until I get the color that I want, just kind of detailing him, adding shadows in between all of his little cracks and crevices, and then I'm going to start focusing more on his face. So for his face, I ended up going into all those cracks and crevices as well, and just kind of making them a lot more shadowed and darker. Then I'm going to start using similar colors that we used with the fabric markers, but with my acrylic paints, and I'm going to start kind of bringing a little bit more color to his cheeks. Now his face does start looking a little bit weird at first, but again, these are kind of more undertones, and then I'm going to kind of wash over them with the other colors. And then after I was done painting him, I of course let him dry a little bit, and then I wanted to add a few extra details to him. So I decided that I wanted to add some yellow blossoms to his tree branches, so I made a few felt flowers and I just kind of glued them into place where I thought they would look nice. I didn't do a ton of them, just a few here and there. And then I'm also going to be adding a few gems. I had some amethyst and I wanted to add them into his little cracks, so I took some of my fabric glue and I just kind of glued a few of them here and there throughout his body. Okay guys, and this is my mandrake. I had a lot of fun with this because I've never made anything like this. I had a lot of fun with trying to make it look lumpy because it's just something new and I like doing new things. Now, like I said at the beginning, this was a commission, so it won't be available for sale in my Etsy shop, but I do have a ton of other creatures if you're interested in checking it out. I'll have the links down below. I also have a lot of links to different things that I like to use to make my art dolls, so if you're interested in anything that I use, I should have links down below. Now, these are affiliated links, so if you do end up buying anything through them, it does help support the channel. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!